Good evening to those who are joining us for this webinar on the state of the church at Ladue Chapel Presbyterian Church. We are so glad you have chosen to join us tonight so that we can share information with you. We are going to wait just a few moments as people tune in. Hi, Bill. Hi, Bob. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We already have a good crew joining us, so thank you. Hi, Barry. Hi, Agnes. Hi, Ed. Good to see you. So glad you're here tonight. As we begin this webinar tonight, we're going to steer your attention to the bottom of your screen. Across the bottom, if you put your cursor there, you should find a Q&A, two little speech bubbles with a Q and A. As we go through the webinar tonight, at any time, if you have questions, you are welcome to type your question in that Q&A section. We ask that you put the questions in that Q&A section because that's going to help me keep track of them as we go through the meeting tonight. We're going to get to as many questions as we possibly can, but we will also be keeping an eye on if we're unable to get to those questions. We will be sure to do it the best that we can. So as the presenters are making their presentation, please feel free to type your questions in that Q&A function.
And just to clarify, we'll respond to questions after everyone presents. So, enter them as we go, but don't worry that they've been forgotten about just because we go from one speaker to the next.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us tonight. Wait just another minute or two as people are tuning in. Again, if you are just joining us for the state of the church here at Ladue Chapel Presbyterian Church, thank you for spending some time with us this evening. As we go through the presentation, you are invited to type your questions at any time in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you put them there so that we can keep track as we go throughout the evening. And as Doug just reminded us, we will take questions at the end. You can put questions in at any time, but we're going to save the last portion of our time together tonight for questions. So if you type your question in, it might take us until the end to get to it, but don't worry, we haven't forgotten you. Well, I think that we have reached a good number to go ahead and get started, Doug.
Great. Thank you, Mel. And thank you all for tuning in this evening. I'd like to begin with a word of prayer. If we could join our hearts in prayer. Most wise and wonderful God, we are grateful for the gift of your church, for all the ways that you claim us as the body of Christ. As we gather this evening, we trust that you are indeed present among us, that your Spirit is ever leading us forward. We give thanks for Ladue Chapel and its faithful membership. We give thanks for the future you are laying out before us. And we give thanks that you claim each one of us as a beloved child of yours. Amen. As I just said, thank you so much for joining us this evening. In this time when it is so easy to feel disconnected, we are grateful to be gathered for this conversation about the state of Ladue Chapel. I want to thank Mel for organizing this webinar and for serving as our MC. We'll have a series of presentations followed by a time of questions that you can enter into the Q&A function. And we're planning to be together for about 45 minutes this evening. My first nearly 4 months with you have been so very different than anyone would have mapped out when you began your search for a new pastor. I've dearly longed to gather with you all in the sanctuary and worship together, to chat over coffee in the gathering place, to visit you in the hospital when you're ill, and to have time with you at all the fellowship events which make this church a family. Frankly, it's been a very frustrating time, but I've also been blessed in so many ways. I am so grateful for the warm welcome I have received. I've been so deeply touched by how much you love this church and how deeply you are connected to each other. This is a family of faith that clearly loves each other and loves their God. And you need to know I'm honored to be in your midst. I'm grateful for our elders and their committees and their diligent leadership, our deacons and their passionate efforts to care for this congregation, our Stevens ministers and how empathetic and enthusiastic they are in all that they do. The Holy Spirit is alive and well. I'm grateful for our senior staff, for Courtney, David, Ann, Mel, and Dieter. They are remarkably talented and deeply committed to serving the body of Christ. I have to tell you, it is a joy to work with them. I have been so impressed by their creativity, for all they have done online with you, the worship services, the concerts, the women's retreat, the prayer times, the classes on our book of confessions, the remarkable boxes for Advent and Lent and Christmas Eve for children and adults, inviting all of us to grow in faithfulness in these important liturgical seasons. For all of their efforts to trim the budget in every way we can, to be good stewards of what we have been given. The Holy Spirit is alive and well. I'm grateful for the arrival of Jessie Hempstead, our new administrative assistant, and the way that she has juggled the jobs of at least 2 people in this time of transition. For Jane Gear and her willingness to jump in and help ensure our financial house is in good order, and the addition of 2 incredibly smart and dedicated people to our financial office. Keith Cult, our new financial assistant, and Mark Vago, our new business administrator. And of course, for Kent Kay, our financial consultant, and all of his very faithful service. And for John and Ryan, for all they do to keep our building in good order. You have so many people working for you who work so hard. The Holy Spirit is alive and well at Ladue Chapel. I am grateful for your generosity to our stewardship campaign, for how well you watch over each other, for your passionate hunger to once again be in worship together in person, for all of our drive-thrus when you have come to the church to receive communion elements and donate food for Isaiah 58 Ministries. Although I am convinced that I will only be able to recognize some of you by name if I see you sitting in your car, nonetheless, the Holy Spirit is alive and well. I am grateful for the work of Sharon Finoglio and our finance committee, which have diligently worked to attain a complete grasp of our financial situation so that we may make informed decisions about how we may proceed as an institution. I'm grateful for all the meticulous work our staff has done to find savings in our budget by reviewing all our administrative line items, contracts, and programming costs. Tonight, we will be hearing from several speakers beside myself. Kent Kay, our financial consultant from the CPA firm UHY, will speak to us about some of our financial history, our current financial position, and the budget. Elder Jim Forsyth, chair of our property committee and a member of our endowment committee, will be speaking to us about how we will be making use of our endowment resources. Jim was hoping to be with us live, but he is on a plane at the moment, so he has a taped message for us. Elder Delancey Smith, co-chair of the Stewardship Committee, will be speaking to us about the importance of stewardship in this time. I will conclude with some thoughts about the future for us together at Ladue Chapel. As you have heard, you are welcome to send any questions you may have as the presentations are going on. Mel will organize and combine them for efficiency, and following the presentations, we will seek to answer as many questions as we can during this time. If we do not get to your question this evening, we are happy to respond to emails. And of course, we hope you will be joining me for the upcoming roundtable Zoom conversations. They will allow for a little bit of a more informal format where we can chat. Now I turn the floor over to our financial consultant, Kent Kay. Kent?
Thank you, Pastor. I do appreciate it so much. I'm going to be sharing a screen and so that we can talk through. And Mel, am I okay with our screen? Awesome. Thank you so very much. It has been a joy working with Ladue Chapel over the last few months. It's wonderful getting to work with each of the staff, the members that have come in and assist, and to get to know your new pastor very well. As we began our journey, we got to talking about what kinds of things were important and what we needed to do. For some reason, I'm having a little bit of problem here. Let me get this right here. Now we're going. We got to looking at the finances of the church and the reporting, and we wanted to make sure that we were getting accurate information and then make good decisions about finances as we go forward. So a big part of what we did is look through 5 different steps of planning. We had to start out with analysis, and as was mentioned earlier, Sharon Fanolio is wonderful with the leadership in your finance committee. I worked and talked with her and Mark Crawford, and as part of that discussions, they talked to me about how do we separate that which is operational from that which might be specific or extra. So we focused on the operating funds. We segregated out and are looking at separately things such as restricted gifts, bequests, the endowment earnings. We had to make sure that insurance proceeds and the related expenses of fixing those things which needed to be fixed with those proceeds were separated. Any special offerings, the memorials, the honorariums, and capital expenses, because these are handled in a different manner. So after we went through and looked at some of the prior years, and we stripped out what we refer to as some of the noise, we found that our spending for operational purposes over the last 3 years has been about $300,000 more than the revenues, the collections, the contributions, the rent revenues that we've received over the last 3 years. A lot of what was happening is the insurance proceeds that would precede the actual expenses, the restricted gifts that had not yet been fulfilled, the very nice endowment revenues over the last couple of years in particular had masked these results. And so we started focusing on how do we identify what is operationally being received from the church and what is being spent by the church. So we went through in developing the 2021 budget that has been talked with many folks about, which we'll go through that in a moment. But we went through, well, what's going to be our assumptions? So we started out from a concept of what did we actually receive and spend through October 2020. And then we looked at our budget for November and December in 2020, and we added those together and said, this will be our starting point. And then looking at the economy of the as it is and the generosity of the church, we identified what our actual gifts were to pledged contributions during the current year and found that it was $1,392,000. And then we said, hey, let's look at a 1% increase in that, reflecting the generosity and the commitment of the church. We had a lot of wonderful discussion. Should it be 3%? Should it be 2%, 4%, 1%? And 1% was a conservative estimate that the Finance Committee and members of session were suggesting. We did want to keep the mission budget at 20% of the 2020 contributions, and that's the 2020 total contributions that were for operations, not including and that would be monies over and above toward pledged contributions that would not include some of the restricted or bequest type contributions. And that was included in the budget. The Personnel Committee did talk about salaries and recommended a 4% increase, which we've incorporated into the budget. We were able to negotiate a no increase continuation with our fringe benefit rates for healthcare, for dental, for our contributions toward retirement and life insurance and disabilities. And then there was a review of the different revenue and expense line items. And we were very fortunate to have a wonderful gentleman, Doug Wilton of the church, who was able to dive into these line items and provide us with some very valuable information. So how did we start developing it? As we talked about, Doug Wilton got into analyzing individual accounts and making recommendations. We then updated that information and received other suggested changes and presented this to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee received the recommendations, revisited the adjusted balances, and they too made recommendations. The Endowment Committee was the information about the budget and about what was being expected in the way of contributions and other revenues compared to what was proposed in expenses and what kind of need there was to close that gap. Then we presented this information to session, again, receiving recommendations. And then lastly, there was a pastoral review that went through. There were some decisions that were made, as Pastor King has talked to you about. There was an inclusion of some capital improvements and some additional type items, but having to do with replacing a chiller and finishing up the last deductible having to do with the roof, some replacement of doors, some remotes, and a small amount for the unanticipated capital that they're having. Finally, we came back to the Finance Committee. We had some frank discussions of where we had ended up, and I believe that the Finance Committee, as I recall, did approve and recommend that we make this recommendation to the church. So one of the important aspects of the budget this year is a review of what the policy is for the endowment, which has been generously put together over periods of year and has been grown through very prudent financial investments. And we found, first of all, a review of policy that found certain things in place. That it is the purpose of the endowment is to provide funds to develop new ministries, meet extraordinary needs of the churches, and if necessary, supplement the operating fund. It pointed out that the committee would annually develop what is called a maximum spending rate. That's a defined term. It's a percentage that would be applied, as it says there, against what would be the most recently completed 3-year annual balances. That amount, that average right now for this last 3 years was just a little bit less than $8 million. So we're requesting a 4.5% maximum expenditure rate for 2021. This is less than the general guideline that was identified in the policy. It doesn't have a hard and set. It just says this is the general guideline that we think this maximum expenditure rate should not exceed. And this year's request does not exceed that. So the amount that's being requested is $357,075. And this is being done to fulfill the items that are expected or were expected from gifts that were made. It will be applied into the budget because most of the gifts are for budgetary type items. And then the other thing that we would tell you is that this is coming out of the earnings of the endowment. Anything that was endowed that said we will not spend this corpus is not being spent. The corpus amount is a little bit less than $3 million. And so at $8 million, we've got about a $5 million accumulated amount in the endowment that's not part of the corpus or was part of just a restricted gift for purposes. So as we look at the budget, this gives you a synopsis. It's a high level summary of what we anticipate in the way of revenues. The budget proposed is this middle column, and the anticipated revenues with the transfer of the funds from restrictions from the endowment for operations is $2,150,000. The amount being spent is $2,141,000, with approximately $9,000 more revenues than expenses. And then you can see the breakdown by the missions level, the per capita to the presbytery, the personnel cost, including fringe benefits and some expenses, education, worship and music, young adults, ministry, administration, which includes such things as maintenance, repair, and utilities, and then the capital outlay. You see the column that the $81,000 that would come from the endowment would go to this, and then this shows the 357 anticipated revenue that would then be distributed. The endowment, certainly we would hope, would make more than the 4.5% return, but that's is going to vacillate, and it's going to change from year to year. So it's pretty straightforward. And as indicated, there's been a number of people who have very diligently spoken with us about the needs of the church and what should be done. And as Pastor King pointed out, with great frugality in doing this. So I'm going to turn it back to Mel, to you, so that you can start, and I'm going to stop sharing. How about that? And you can now have our next step.
Thank you, Kent. That was very helpful. And so now we'll see a taped video from Elder Jim Forsyth.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Forsyth, and I've been a member of Ladue Chapel for 6 years. I've been on the endowment committee for 5 years and was just elected an elder and head of the property committee. I'm speaking to you today about the endowment, and we have great news to share. The endowment has almost doubled in the past 5 years and just surpassed $10 million. A big thanks to Mark Crawford for his leadership as head of the committee, and David Hagee, who is our account manager with Commerce Trust. Ladue Chapel has never taken an annual draw from the endowment in the past. It has always been a special request, and that would be a couple times a year, and it was never more than maybe 1.5% of the endowment. Going forward, the endowment committee is in favor of a yearly draw of 4 to 5%, which is common practice among churches, schools, and nonprofits. This draw would make up roughly 20% of Ladue Chapel's budget, while the rest is from annual giving. This should enable Ladue Chapel to fulfill its mission and outreach goals with a balanced budget. Doug King and his team have examined the budget carefully, gone line by line, and bid things out and made a few cuts here and there. So I feel that the budget is in great shape. I think the donors of the endowment would be proud that Ladue Chapel is going to use their endowment in this fashion. This will enable Ladue Chapel to proactively manage the church and its needs over a, say, 5-year period. In the past, the draws were sort of reactive in nature, and this will enable the church to be more proactive in managing this building and the programs, the mission, the outreach, and the capital expenditures. The draw in 2021 would be 4.5%, and hopefully moving forward would be about 4% a year. The endowment, I will give you a little background, is currently invested 80% in equities and 20% in fixed income. That includes CDs. You know, interest rates are very low, So we give discretion to David Hagee to go up to 80% on the equity side. And we anticipate returns going forward of at least 7%. And if we draw 4% from the endowment, you can see that that's self-sustaining and the endowment will still grow. And if we get additional gifts, that would be helpful. The endowment committee feels very excited about the future returns and the investment buckets in the endowment and the future of Ladue Chapel. And interestingly, how things work out, Ladue Chapel has taken a minimal draw from the endowment over the life of the endowment. And with the growth over the last 5 years, now Ladue Chapel can reap the rewards of having a bigger endowment and using it appropriately. This is an exciting time, an exciting new chapter for Ladue Chapel with Doug King in charge with his great team, and we all need to support Doug and the church going forward. Thank you very much.
Jim, I want to thank you in absentia. I hope your plane lands soon. We look forward to catching up with you. Delancey, would you like to speak to us now?
Yes, I'm happy to. I'm Delancey Smith, Chair of the Stewardship Committee. And as you just heard from Kent and Jim, by far the largest source of operating revenue for the church comes from contributions. And as you might imagine, it's been a difficult year for stewardship. The pandemic has literally changed all of our lives. But for more than 75 years, through wars, political unrest, cultural change, economic downturns, we at Ladue Chapel have always remained faithful and generous in supporting the work of the church. In October last year, Ed Reeb, our stewardship campaign chairperson, kicked off the 2021 Our Legacy, Our Promise campaign. Each week, one of our members offered their personal message on what stewardship has meant to them. We mailed a stewardship brochure to all members highlighting some of the ways our congregation has been blessed with God's gifts. A beautiful building for worship, sharing, learning, celebrating. Our exceptional, talented, and dedicated staff, led by Reverend Doug King, to nurture our spiritual growth. Music that reaches into our souls and lifts us up to praise God. Education that sparks dialogue and curiosity, enriching our faith and teaching our children about the presence of God in their lives. And mission outreach that is critical to preserving the future of our community, our nation, and our world. Additionally, we sent follow-up letters thanking those who made pledges. We personally called those who hadn't yet pledged. We delivered year-end messages reminding people about gifts of stocks and other securities. And we made follow-up calls and sent emails to those who may not have pledged yet. Ladue Chapel's founding members have been the generation which has, when needed, stepped up to meet the church's financial and other needs. Increasingly, and sadly, many of this generation are no longer with us. In the last 5 years, we've lost the pledges of almost 100 faithful members due primarily to their passing. Many members have helped meet the challenge of this by increasing their pledge commitments yearly to support Ladue Chapel, and we want to express our thanks. To date, our 2021 campaign, 237 members have generously pledged $1,146,000. Unfortunately, many more have not. We are strong and faithful supporters, but to meet our goal of $1,405,000, we pray that those who have not yet pledged step up and make their commitment now. And to those of you who have pledged, thank you. But please consider maybe an additional pledge to help us meet our goal. So now's the time to look to our future, to look beyond the masks we see, to see the hope and peace that God's love will provide us if we answer his call to be good stewards of the gifts we've been given. So make your promise, keep your promise, and continue the legacy of Ladue Chapel. So you can pledge now or increase your pledge by going to the online giving link at the laduechapel.org website, or by calling the church during business hours next week. Now's the time. Thank you, and thanks be to God.
Thank you, Delancey. So I want to take a, we've tried to do our best to give you a snapshot of where we are now. I want to share with you what brings me joy and excitement as I look to the future. I have much anticipation for what's to come here for us together. This morning, we were thrilled to have our first live stream service with worship occurring once again at 10:30 a.m. for us all. It's a small step forward to all of us being together again. I'm really excited about Holy Week because we're going to be able to provide a myriad of opportunities for us to be together. On Palm Sunday, we will be having our Easter egg hunt for our children. On Maundy, Thursday, we will gather in small groups in the West Garden for Holy Communion. On Good Friday, there will be modified Stations of the Cross in the grounds around the building. For those who are unable to attend on Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, there will be recorded services on both of those days. On Holy Saturday, people can come and walk the labyrinth. On Easter, we will have our sunrise service on the front lawn for those early morning diehards and a recorded service for everyone else. We're looking forward to opportunities to celebrate together. We need it. We're looking forward to congratulating our confirmation students in March, for fun and learning opportunities for our grade school children in April and May, for the annual Strawberry Festival in June, for a Rally Day party in September. We're looking forward to a new Ladue Chapel cookbook and potluck supper. We're looking forward to workshops and art exhibits that are being planned. And with our new budgeting process, including drawing on endowed funds for annual expenses, we can now create a long-term capital expenditure budget as part of our annual budget. This will allow us to be more proactive in maintaining our wonderful facility. We look forward to all of the ministry that will occur on this campus. We look forward to a campaign to continue to enhance the generous contributions to our endowment in order that we will always have the resources we need to engage in ministry and service in all the ways in which we are called. And of course, what we so dearly hunger for most is to be bodily present with each other in the sanctuary and worship. Our healthcare task force is constantly reviewing the data and monitoring the infection and mortality rates. They meet regularly to provide guidance to our session about when we can safely return to worship together inside and in person. The staff is continuing to refine all of the safety requirements necessary for a prudent reopening, including limited seating that is reserved, required masking, proper ventilation, and entrance and exit routes. Worship will not look the same for a while, but what a joy it will be to be together. As we look to the next steps, we are hoping that if the numbers continue to trend downward, we will be able to begin reopening the building to small groups in April in preparation for welcoming people back into worship in the sanctuary soon. The warmer weather will afford us opportunities for worship and fellowship on our lovely campus in a variety of ways. As we move forward, there is clearly work for us to do as a church family. Work to reopen, work to strengthen the bonds that tie us together as the body of Christ. Work to do to ensure our financial house is in good order for the years to come. We need to collectively step up and financially support this remarkable community of faith to ensure that we may continue to be a leader in mission and a provider of vibrant programming for this congregation and this community. As Delancey has said, we are asking those of you who have yet to pledge to do so, and those of you who have pledged to consider increasing your pledge. You can do so by going to the giving section of the website or by calling the church. We are not without challenges, but I have been continually awed by how deeply you love each other and love your God. The Spirit is indeed alive and well here, and I am grateful for all we will share in the days to come. I hope you will join me on one of the upcoming smaller roundtable Zooms so we can get to know each other and talk about all that we will share in the days ahead. Keep an eye on your email and on the website for the different roundtables as they are scheduled. I want to thank our three speakers, Kent Kay, Jim Forsyth, and Delancey Smith, for their very helpful presentations, and all of you for joining us this evening. Now we have time for a few questions. Dieter and Mel and I are all available to speak, as well as the panelists. If you have a question you have yet to submit, please use the Q&A function to do so at this time. Mel?
Okay, so we have some questions, and I think a good place to start is about the endowment. So there are some questions. First about, there's a question about usually the recognized guidelines for these types of funds, endowment, is 4% for the withdrawal. So how do we get to 5% or closer to 5%?
So, I mean, as Kent told us, that were the current guidelines that Ladue Chapel has, that we can go as high as 5%. I agree that 4% is the ideal number we would like to be at. I will tell you, I was speaking to Tom R., who's the pastor at Village Presbyterian Church in Kansas City this week, and he said they are currently drawing at 5%. And so in these times, we'd love to be at 4%. We are excited to only be at 4.5 and not at 5 right now, because of the added stress of this time. Churches across the country are facing unprecedented financial challenge because of the pandemic.
And there was another question about the rate of withdrawal. So if the endowment doesn't grow or grow enough, would the withdrawals lessen or, if necessary, cease?
So I will say that the advantage of a 3-year rolling average means that the fluctuations of the market do not affect the number as it would if we were just, if we were drawing on 4.5% of the 10 million we have now. There would be a risk because the market could drop. The 3-year rolling average means that if we have a year that's not successful, that helps balance that all out. Ken, you're an expert on all of this. Is there anything you would add to that analysis?
The rolling average definitely is the reasoning. We're doing the 4.5% on 8 million instead of the 10. And then also this is a hope that as the church continues to grow and people are moved by the mission of the church and the mission of Christ, they'll be able to make other gifts to the endowment, perhaps leaving their estates or making a gift that would then go in perpetuity towards something that is very important to the ministry of the church.
And so one of the things I mentioned in my brief comments on the future is that we're looking for a campaign for the endowment, for meeting with folks to talk about planned giving, to talk, if we're going to make good use of this, we need to be smart about encouraging people to participate in adding their generosity to this. So that will be one of our efforts, is to grow the size of the endowment.
I think this feeds into one of the other questions that came in that says, how are we going to close the gap between the 1.146 million in pledges and the 1.450 pledge goal?
So, one of the ways we're going to do it is by full transparency. We are sending this word out to the congregation, to all of you right now, that we have a need. Delancey mentioned the founding generation of this congregation, which for decades supported and carried this place financially. And that generation, much of which has gone on to greater glory. And so we need to recognize that it's all of our responsibility to take a piece of this puzzle to help support that. So we're reaching out to you to close that gap. We've sought to lower expenses as best we can. And we're speaking with you this evening in these roundtables to come. And so one of the things we're going to ask of you is, this has been recorded. We're going to ask that you spread the word, that you invite when you talk to church members and people say, what's going on? Invite them to listen to this recording. Invite them to give one of us a call. Mel and Dieter and I and the finance people are all happy to talk to you about this context and share with you exactly where we stand. Because we know the generosity of this congregation, and we believe that we can get to the number we need to get to.
There are some questions about that $300,000 shortfall. One question that came in is, was that 300,000 figure per year in the last 3 years or in total?
It was an annual of 300,000 per year, and it was predominantly coming from cash flow, things having to do with cash that was had built up over time that was then drawn down. And some of it was just merely timing. This year, the church was fortunate in being able to, during very challenging times, avail themselves of the PPP loan program. And we're in the process of working through the forgiveness of that, which we fully anticipate will occur. So, that helped with cash flow aspects of, because that's not recognized as revenue until it's actually forgiven. But in the past, it was just a matter of there was money that was available over time, and then so that's what ended up happening.
And there are a number of questions about how we are proposing using the endowment. This is a shift going from special projects to an annual draw. So, and it seems like there's a few questions of concern around, is this really going to help close that gap? Is this really going to help? So if we want to speak to how is this use of the endowment helpful moving forward?
So why don't I start on that, and anyone else who wants to join in can. I think the first thing we need to remember is when we look to these gifts were given to this community of faith to ensure that we could engage in ministry, that we could worship together and learn together and fellowship together and engage in mission and care for others. And so that was the intent of these gifts. And so we are seeking to honor that intent by using that to allow us to do those things. The 4.5% draw gives us $357,000, as Kent pointed out, which is helping us close the gap of where we need to get to have a balanced budget. The bottom line is, of course, we still have a ways to go because we need to do our part as well. We are grateful to have this past generosity to help us do what we do. If we didn't have it, we would have questions about what kind of mission we could do and what kind of staffing we could have. We would face all of those serious issues. We have this great past generosity, and now we need to mirror that generosity right now. So it's a part of closing the gap. It does not close the entire gap.
Okay. I'm just sifting through a few more questions here. So there is a question about is the use of endowment funds in operating expenses going to be an ongoing thing, or are we working to not have the endowment part of the operating funds move in the future?
So I would say our first goal would be to reduce that draw from 4.5 to 4, which would be the ideal draw number. We always want stewardship to continue to raise up. We want this present generation to take responsibility for how we do what we do. But using the endowment money and building that into the budget, part of that is a huge advantage, because historically how we've handled capital expenses here is something would break and we'd go to the endowment to fix it. With building this into the annual budget, we can create a capital expenditure schedule. So that means that, we sat down and we've laid out when HVAC units are going to be replaced over the next 3 years. And so we're going to be able to do that for the entire part of our institution. And it will be a far better way to manage things. So we'll be replacing things before they break. We won't be responding, we'll be acting proactively. So my assumption is that we will be using a draw on the endowment in the years to come. And that is, as Jim has told us, that is a very common practice. I've served several churches who have done this and have used that well. There is a bit of a balancing act to this, because the use of an endowment could suggest to people that we don't need their stewardship support. Oh, you have all this money that you can use to spend. It's important that we communicate to people that endowments are not savings accounts that we just draw out. Endowments are engines. They're a way that we can motivate and move our programming forward in strong ways. And so we need to raise stewardship, and we need to use this endowment in prudent ways. And it will allow this place to continue to grow into who you have always been, which is a place that is filled with energy and programming and mission efforts. And, you know, I think I said this when I first came to meet with you all. I love churches that are freight trains, and Ladue Chapel is a freight train. We want this place humming. And to do that, we need to use all the resources available to us and use them prudently.
Great. Just keeping an eye on our time, it is 5:45, and we said that this would be a 45-minute discussion. So there are a few more questions that we can't quite get to at the moment. So if you still would like to see some answers to questions, please don't hesitate to email the pastoral staff. We'll be sure to get back to you in a timely manner. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time. And we hope that you will share this recording. We will be sure to send it out so that you are able to access it when it is available.
And please come to the roundtables. Don't leave me lonely on Zoom. I'm looking forward. You know, we want to hear from all of you. I want to learn why you love this place and why this place is so important to you. I want to grow in my understanding of why I've recognized your passion for this place. I want to hear the details behind it. And I want to share with you my excitement in being here. And that will give us a chance to answer more of these questions as well.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Delancey. Thank you, Jim, for recording your message to us. And we will be sure to get this recording out so that you can share it with others. Thank you so much for joining us.